To speak of the good life, truly, is to navigate a treacherous landscape. We are taught from youth that happiness is something we acquire, a treasure hidden at the end of a long path. But does it exist like that? Is eudaimonia merely a distant state, waiting for us to arrive and claim it? The whisperings of casual discourse often fail to grasp the profound weight of virtue. We dismiss deep wisdom with a wave of the hand, preferring instead the simple comforts of immediate sensation. It is easy to mistake momentary pleasure for lasting satisfaction, to treat character as an accessory rather than the very structure of the self is perhaps humanity's most comfortable illusion. We begin by asking, what truly defines a life well lived? Is it accumulation? Is it renown? Or something quieter, more intrinsic? The initial encounter with this question often feels unsettling. It forces us to look inward, not at the reflection of others' praise, but into the core mechanisms of our own being. The ancients believed that human nature was intrinsically linked to reason. They argued that our unique capacity for thought is not merely a luxury, but our defining function. If we are rational animals, then flourishing, the optimal realization of our potential must necessarily involve the constant exercise and honing of that very rationality. To live according to passion alone, or mere habit, is like a magnificent instrument played poorly. It possesses great potential, but fails to resonate with its true harmony. The journey toward understanding this truth is rarely smooth. It begins not with an epiphany delivered by a sage on a high pedestal, but often with the uncomfortable realization of our own mediocrity. We find ourselves in moments of quiet contemplation, forced to confront the gulf between what we claim to value and how we actually spend our hours. Consider those times when we are faced with a genuine moral choice, when the path of least resistance beckons, the lie that saves trouble, the slight dishonesty that maintains social ease, and yet deep down, a quiet dissonance begins to hum within us. That subtle tension is the voice of philosophy asserting itself. It is demanding alignment between our actions and our deepest understanding of what is right. This realization shifts the focus from achieving an external reward, such as wealth or status. Instead, the locus of value moves inward, toward the development of judgment. The virtue, in this early sense, is simply becoming disciplined in thought. It is learning to pause before reaction, to measure the impulse against the steady weight of rational principle. The greatest misunderstanding about virtue is that it suggests a fixed state of being, a perfected pillar of morality. But true wisdom understands that virtue is not an attainment. It is an ongoing process. It is akin to breathe. You do not achieve breathing, you simply keep doing it, moment after continuous moment. The weight of this self-examination can be crushing. For if our current life falls short of the ideal, where does the effort begin? Do we begin by reforming our habits, by changing our associations, by retraining the most fundamental impulse centers within us? The sheer scope of personal reformation is overwhelming. It suggests that a mere change of circumstance is not enough. One must undergo a deep and sustained internal architecture rebuild. This early reckoning serves as a vital groundwork, establishing the uncomfortable truth that the quest for happiness cannot be outsourced. We are responsible for the calibration of our inner life. The intellectual pursuit, therefore, becomes less an academic exercise and more a necessary form of spiritual discipline, a disciplined turning of attention back upon oneself. We have established that life's highest good, the very aim of human existence, is not merely a collection of external pleasures or transient successes. True flourishing requires something deeper, a sustained excellence within the spirit itself. We are taught to seek virtue in its purest form, Yet how does one practically locate it? How do we know what balance looks like when we only perceive extremes? Consider the path between two vices, excess and deficiency. In every human endeavor, from wielding a knife to speaking truth, there exists a harmonious center point. This point is not found by accident, nor is it some abstract concept understood only by scholars. It is a measurable sweet spot, an equilibrium that requires precise calibration of our actions and intentions. To understand this mean, one must first recognize the full spectrum of human tendency. If we are prone to excessive displays of emotion, overwhelming ourselves with pity or anger, we have moved beyond measured humanity. But if we recoil into deficiency, becoming apathetic or coldly indifferent, we lose the vital spark of engagement. The good life, therefore, does not favor merely avoiding extremes. It demands active participation in finding that golden middle ground. It is less an absence of vice and more a careful, conscious alignment with reason's steady hand. This delicate point requires constant adjustment. Think of the perfect archer. He must not pull back too far, nor not enough. Too little tension and the arrow falls short. Too much and his form breaks, rendering him unable to shoot at all. The sweet spot is that ideal muscular tension, maintained with effortless focus. Our lives are governed by similar tensions. We swing between talking excessively, a flattery that exhausts others, and remaining stubbornly silent, a withdrawal that prevents necessary connection. Virtue calls us to the measured word, the just action, the moderation of desire. This realization shifts the goal from simply being good to actively calibrating ourselves into a state of reasoned appropriateness. It is an art form requiring judgment or phronses, which is perhaps the most subtle and difficult gift to master. Phronses is not mere knowledge. It is practical wisdom, the ability to discern the correct mean in any specific, unpredictable situation. Knowledge tells you what virtue is. Phronses tells you how to be virtuous right now with these people, under these circumstances. It acknowledges that context matters profoundly. The ideal balance for generosity when one's coffers are empty is vastly different from the ideal balance when one has boundless resources. We must learn to judge these varying requirements of circumstance against the immutable principle of reason. This process of self-measurement becomes a continuous act of refinement. Every decision, every word spoken in passion or deliberation, serves as data point for our internal calibration. We are continually plotting a course back toward that central pillar of reasoned balance. It is a journey away from reactive living and toward thoughtful existence. Recognizing the mean does not make virtue easy. It merely illuminates its precise location. The tension between excess and deficiency demands perpetual awareness, a readiness to adjust the inner mechanism at any given moment. This ongoing effort is what transforms the philosophical ideal into lived reality. It shows us that happiness is rarely found in grand gestures or sudden revelations, but in the persistent, disciplined pursuit of this perfect internal calibration, one mindful breath and measured action after another. If virtue is to be a guide for the soul, it cannot simply be grasped through idle talk or theoretical contemplation. It must find its footing in the demanding ground of reality. The concepts we have examined, the careful balance, the mean between excess and deficiency, are elegant ideas when confined to the mind. But human life resists such simple diagrams. A principle that works in theory often falters when tested by the unpredictable demands of a wet world. And so, philosophy turns its gaze toward action itself. If we are truly pursuing eudaimonia, flourishing as Aristotle suggests, then our inquiry cannot remain within the sheltered walls of the academy. It must spill out into the marketplace, the gym, and the workshop, the places where sweat meets skill. The self that is merely reasoned about is an empty construct. It has never felt fatigue, nor faced genuine opposition. Such a theory remains only a whisper on the wind. To know virtue requires doing something difficult. It demands expenditure, effort, and repetition until the action itself becomes second nature. Consider the athlete. His strength does not spring forth fully formed by contemplation of geometry. It is forged through grueling routines. It is measured in the disciplined resistance of muscle against gravity. The body, like a habit, must be continuously hammered into shape. Similarly, the soul requires this kind of rigor. Virtue, therefore, is nothing less than practiced habit. It is a disposition, an internal structure built by repeated conscious choices. The carpenter who carves wood does not suddenly become masterful upon reading a treatise on craftsmanship. His hand gains its precision through countless repetitions, the rhythmic strike of the chisel, the careful measurement against grain. Each flawed piece completed, each cut corrected, solidifies his skill and refines his judgment. This process is the perfect model for moral character. The student who seeks wisdom does not receive it like a gift. He acquires it through long nights hunched over difficult texts, through grappling with arguments that initially seem contradictory and impossible to reconcile. His intellectual growth requires sustained dedication, often when motivation flags and sleep begs for respite. The very act of endurance, of choosing the difficult path over the easy distraction, is what molds his character. These examples illuminate a profound truth. Virtue is not an innate gift bestowed by nature or fate. It is something we do. We build it through disciplined activity, recognizing that effort itself contributes profoundly to our being. The struggle is not merely preparation for life. The struggle is part of living well. This brings us to the crucial concept of hexis. While sometimes translated simply as habit, it carries a weight far greater than mere routine. It implies an acquired state of character, a natural tendency that arises from deliberate practice until it feels effortless. When you repeatedly act justly, when honesty becomes your immediate and easiest response regardless of cost or convenience, then justice is no longer a concept to be recalled. It has become you. It defines your nature. The self-mastery achieved through this steady stream of effort grants us not just skill, but resilience. When we know that our character was built piece by arduous piece, through the choice to endure the pain now for a better state later, we gain an inner fortitude. We become capable of tolerating frustration because we have spent time in it before. The true measure of any philosophy, then, is not the brilliance of its initial theory, but the grit with which it can withstand daily erosion. It asks us to shift our understanding from a static knowledge of good behavior to an active commitment to constantly performing that behavior. Happiness, eudaimonia, is therefore revealed less as a destination reached and more as the ongoing momentum generated by disciplined action. It is the accumulated weight of virtuous choices made when no one is watching, and nothing will reward the effort. This understanding requires a profound psychological shift. We must move from thinking that we ought to be brave or should act with temperance to recognizing that our true nature will only follow the actions we consistently choose. Character is not defined by potential. It is defined by performance. We have journeyed through the architecture of character. We learned that virtue is not merely a theory to be contemplated in quiet chambers, but a muscle requiring constant exercise. It is built, piece by painstaking piece, through choice and action. Until now, we treated happiness as something sought after, a brilliant destination visible at the horizon. But perhaps it is more accurately described as movement itself. The understanding shifts when we move from the abstract definition of good to the actual experience of doing good. Aristotle tells us that human flourishing, or eudaimonia, cannot be bottled up or received passively. It must manifest through continuous activity, an active unfolding of our inherent potential. Think of a musician. The skill exists within them intellectually, yet the music only emerges when their fingers dance across the strings. It requires the energetic process of performance. Similarly, for us, the fully realized self finds expression not in quiet thought alone, but in meaningful engagement with the world around us. This brings us to a profound realization. True happiness is intrinsically linked to activity itself. It is the joy inherent in the doing. When we are fully immersed in an activity that aligns with our deepest capacities, whether it is mastering a complex craft, solving an intractable problem, or simply maintaining a disciplined routine, we do not feel merely rewarded, we feel fundamentally alive. The satisfaction we derive from honest labor, from focused effort, is not separate from virtue. Rather, the virtuous life is this continuous process of excellent activity. If we are truly good people, our existence will naturally take the form of purposeful action. The inaction that plagues us, the inertia born of distraction, laziness, or fear, is itself a deviation from what it means to be fully human. Consider the difference between reading about swimming and actually swimming. Reading gives knowledge. Swimming requires expenditure of energy and muscle memory. Only in the water does one truly understand buoyancy, resistance, and rhythm. Our lives are similar. Knowing how to act justly or temperately is vastly different from repeatedly choosing justice or temperance under pressure. The body of our habit, our character, must be constantly tested by the flow of real life. The deep satisfaction we feel when a challenging task is completed, not through luck, but through dedicated effort and skillful application, speaks directly to this principle. It suggests that inherent worth isn't found in possessing certain qualities, such as great lineage or immense wealth, but in how those capacities are used. The value lies in the function itself. This perspective changes our relationship with struggle. Struggle is no longer an unfortunate obstacle to be overcome before happiness can arrive. Instead, the struggle itself becomes integral to the process of achieving fulfillment. It is the necessary friction that polishes the rough stone of potential into something beautiful and useful. The effort expended builds not only a finished product, but also the strength of character required to sustain subsequent efforts. The mastery we seek is thus multidimensional. We must master our emotions, as Chapter 8 taught us, by controlling our judgments and reactions. But we must also master our actions in the physical world, our vocations, our skills, our commitments. This integration shows that self-actualization is not merely a state of mind. It is a dynamic pattern of engaged living. And this realization brings with it a deep sense of quiet joy. It is the recognition that life itself, lived well and fully, possesses its own intrinsic sweetness. The highest form of pleasure, the purest eudaimonia, is not a windfall moment, but the steady, rhythmic pulse of existence guided by reason and executed through habituated excellence. We must therefore embrace the active nature of being. We are creatures designed for striving, for building, for creating, for improving. To accept this truth is to find freedom, the freedom from demanding happiness as a static prize, and instead accepting it as the continuous grace found in simply doing one's best again and again, until that practice becomes second nature. The joy of life resides within the motion of virtuous activity itself. We arrive now at the quiet center of self-discovery, a space traditionally occupied by friendship. It is here that our understanding of the good life must deepen beyond mere personal excellence and practical skill. We often mistakenly believe that happiness is solely an individual achievement, a solitary masterpiece built brick by intellectual brick. But Aristotle tells us that human beings are inherently social creatures. We are meant to flourish not alone, but in community. Friendship, therefore, is more than simply companionship or shared pleasure. It is the very crucible in which the self is tested and refined. It acts as a reflecting mirror, showing us who we truly are, often with uncomfortable honesty. Consider this relationship for a moment. Genuine connection forces vulnerability. You cannot curate a friendship when both parties are committed to maintaining polished facades. The depth of true care demands that we present our messy, unedited selves. The flaws, the lingering doubts, the moments of sheer ignorance. It is in these shared vulnerabilities that genuine self-knowledge begins. We learn not from ideal theories alone, but through the imperfections and mutual support offered by another human soul. Friendship reveals to us what we conceal even from ourselves. There are different kinds of relationships. Aristotle distinguishes between them, each serving a unique purpose in our development. Some friendships are based on utility. They benefit both parties. A coworker helping you with a report, a gym partner keeping you accountable for your routine. These are valuable tools, certainly, but they lack the depth required for true ethical growth. Others are based merely on pleasure or shared circumstance, fleeting connections that vanish when the setting changes. And then there is the profound form of friendship, which Aristotle argues is rooted in admiration for the other person's intrinsic character, their virtue itself. This kind of connection moves beyond simple gain or momentary enjoyment. It is a mutual recognition of excellence. To be true friends, we must admire not just what another person does, but who they inherently are. When you find someone whose core principles align with your own search for the good life, that relationship becomes an accelerant for virtue. It provides a stable ground from which you can observe and adjust your own behavior. Imagine yourself viewing your own character through the steady gaze of a trusted friend. Their honesty is like a mirror held up to your soul. Sometimes what you see is merely flattering praise, built upon compliments you wish to hear, but true friendship is sharper, more necessary. It shows you where your impulses stray, where your judgment wavers, or where your habits drift toward the mean's perilous edges. The friend points out the gap between who you claim to be and how you actually act when under pressure. This honest critique, though occasionally painful, is indispensable for character building. If we only surround ourselves with those who affirm our current beliefs or soothe our emotional anxieties, we stagnate. The true friend challenges us. They demand that we live up to the highest version of ourselves that we suspect exists beneath the surface doubts. This sustained, reciprocal effort of ethical self-scrutiny is what allows for continuous flourishing, or eudaimonia. It transforms friendship from a mere comfort into an active philosophical practice. In these deep connections, we learn accountability. Our character becomes intertwined with the reputation and well-being of those we cherish. We realize that harming a friend, or even merely failing them through carelessness or apathy, carries a profound ethical weight. Thus, caring for others does not detract from self-improvement. It is actually the most robust mechanism for it. When our personal joy becomes tied to the observable virtuous activity of another person, when their success in character inspires and challenges us, we move beyond selfish striving. We find a meaning that expands outwards, connecting our internal quest for truth to the external reality of shared human experience. We see that self-mastery is not an isolated victory, but a deeply relational one. It requires witnesses, interlocutors, and mirrors capable of reflecting back the image of what humanity could be. The reflection found in true friendship allows us to correct course when our own introspection becomes too narrow or too flattering. It guides us toward recognizing the balance, the mean, not just in theory, but in action within another's regard. This mutual process elevates virtue from a personal habit into a shared ethical architecture. We are built for connection, and through that connection, we come to truly understand what flourishing means. It is not simply feeling good, nor is it merely being excellent in isolation. It is the ongoing, supported, virtuous dance with others. Friendship, therefore, becomes the necessary catalyst for completing the self-portrait of a well-lived life. We must be willing to accept this uncomfortable, clarifying truth that the greatest insight into our own heart sometimes comes from the eyes of another. Continuous intellectual growth requires conversational sparring. Continuous moral improvement demands trusted accountability partners. Without this reflective mirror, we risk becoming comfortable in our own ignorance, mistaking mere self-satisfaction for genuine wisdom. It is the call to be a better version of oneself, continually affirmed and corrected by the people we care about, that truly moves us toward eudaimonia. This journey acknowledges that the highest form of happiness includes others, a shared light rather than an individual sun. Having traveled through the definition of virtue as a balanced action, we arrive at a central query. Does mere excellence guarantee happiness? The question hangs in the air, weighted by history and lived experience. It forces us to confront an assumption we have carried with us, that if one simply strives to be virtuous, flourishing will inevitably follow. But the lives around us offer a more complex portrait. We see individuals who possess immense wealth, yet their eyes hold a kind of hollow ache. They are successful by societal standards, accumulating goods and titles, but they appear fundamentally unfulfilled. Conversely, we meet those who live with remarkable virtue, people known for their compassion or bravery, yet whose paths are marked by ceaseless struggle, hardship, and unexpected misfortune. It seems that simply perfecting the inner self is not a shield against the capriciousness of fortune. We begin to doubt the simplicity of our earlier conclusions. Is eudaimonia truly just the reward for good behavior? Or is it something far more elusive, requiring us to reconcile our internal ethics with the chaotic unpredictability of external reality? If happiness were simply a destination reached by perfecting one's character, life would be a straight, upward trajectory toward a single peak. But life, in all its messy beauty, resists such neat diagrams. The virtuous person still faces sickness, loss, and injustice. This paradox is deeply troubling for the philosophical mind, forcing us to question whether virtue alone is sufficient. Perhaps our understanding of happiness itself has been too narrow, equating it solely with a state of stable contentment, like lying in a quiet bed receiving accolades. Maybe we are looking for an end point, when perhaps life is not meant to be a series of goals, but a continuous process of becoming. The pursuit of virtue requires everything: the disciplined habit, the practical wisdom, the self-aware friendship. These elements build us up steadily, molecule by careful molecule, but they do not, in themselves, dictate our fate under the whims of fortune or the malice of others. The world outside the philosopher's contemplation remains indifferent to our moral perfection. This realization is a profound shock. It suggests that we must expand our definition of flourishing. If happiness cannot be guaranteed solely by character, then what can? Must we rely more heavily on external goods, things like health, opportunity, or social stability? To embrace this question is to become philosophically humble. It is to acknowledge the limits of human control and the sheer size of the unknown. If eudaimonia is not a static point reached through pure virtue, then perhaps we must reconsider its nature entirely. Maybe happiness is not something received, but rather something perpetually generated. If we view life like an ongoing craft, say, playing music, the true fulfillment does not come from the perfect concert hall applause at the end of the piece. It comes from the focus required on each single note, the willingness to keep practicing even after a mistake, the joy in the sustained effort itself. The struggle becomes integral. The friction is not merely an obstacle. It is the material upon which character is perpetually shaped and polished. This line of questioning leads us naturally toward accepting what lies outside our sphere of immediate influence. If we are to build a life that feels genuinely fulfilling, robust enough to withstand setbacks, we must first draw clear boundaries between what belongs to us, our judgments, our reactions, the way we choose to interpret events, and what does not belong to us at all, the actions of others, global events, or the sudden onset of illness. This separation is perhaps the most difficult and vital ethical practice of all. The implication is radical, that true stability and deep contentment do not come from insulating ourselves from difficulty, but rather from accepting difficulty itself as an inevitable component of the fully realized human existence. We must learn to differentiate between what merely happens to us and how we choose to respond with it. The goal shifts from acquiring happiness as a guaranteed prize to mastering the inner art of response. To view adversity not as a flaw in fate, but as necessary training, a crucial moment that requires our finest judgment. By doing this, the pursuit of eudaimonia becomes less about reaching a state and more about cultivating resilience, becoming a skillful navigators within a wildly unpredictable world. It is a continuous act of choosing how to stand upright, even when the earth beneath us trembles. The journey has led us to this quiet place, a moment of stillness after the torrent of inquiry. We have seen that virtue is not a single jewel, nor is happiness a final, distant mountain peak. Instead, we realize it is something more subtle, more internalized. It resides in the quiet workings of the mind itself. We spend so much effort trying to define eudaimonia by observing external markers, by counting riches or listing achievements, or even measuring emotional responses. We treat happiness like a destination, a box to be checked off a life checklist. But the more we examine it, the less concrete it becomes. If eudaimonia were merely an outcome, then our lives would be predictable machines. Virtue guaranteed a reward. Yet, life proves otherwise. The genuinely virtuous person can face genuine hardship. The best intentions do not shield us from setbacks. This leads to the profound realization that we must shift our focus entirely. We cannot mandate circumstances, nor can we guarantee perfect outcomes. Much of human suffering arises because we wrongly assume a direct correlation, that if I behave perfectly, good things will happen automatically. This is a fundamentally flawed assumption about how the world operates. The crucial boundary we must draw is between what lies within our reach and what remains perpetually beyond it. We have diligently practiced honing our skills in action, mastering balance through practice, and understanding that friendship serves as our essential mirror. All these steps were preparation for this final intellectual reckoning, recognizing where our power truly resides. Our capacity to govern the world is limited only by the boundaries of our own reasoned judgment. External events, The betrayal of a friend, the sudden loss of livelihood, the harsh dictates of fortune. These are powerful currents that sweep over us. They happen independently of our will or our character. We cannot stop them. Our response can be tested like iron in fire. The ultimate control lies not in preventing the blow, but in deciding how we rise after it lands. It is in the judgment we apply to suffering itself. To perceive difficulty as an absolute catastrophe, a sign of divine abandonment or personal failure, is a voluntary act of mind. And this voluntary acceptance is where genuine freedom begins. We have been guided by physical action and relational feedback up to this point. But now, we must consult the internal compass, the whisper of reason. Reason does not offer easy answers. It offers clarity about the architecture of the self. It asks us to constantly interrogate our motives. Are we acting out of fear, out of social expectation, or genuinely because reasoned thought has affirmed that this action is correct and necessary for human flourishing? The whisper of reason urges us toward intellectual contemplation, the deepest engagement with knowledge, the pursuit of understanding truth for its own sake. This contemplative life, according to Aristotle, represents humanity's highest function, our specific potential as rational beings. While physical excellence is admirable and social connection indispensable, true self-realization ultimately ascends into this higher realm of thought. This contemplation is not a retreat from the world. It is rather the most rigorous way of engaging with it. It gives us the framework to understand why we struggle when we lose our certainty. We fear doubt because doubt threatens the comfortable scaffolding of assumed reality, and often, our deepest comforts are built upon unexamined assumptions. Therefore, the mastery of self-sufficiency, the internal quietude that remains steady regardless of external chaos, is achieved by making reason our ultimate arbiter. It teaches us a discipline far more demanding than anything physical, the discipline of thought itself. To live well means to dedicate oneself to the constant refinement of judgment. This refined, thoughtful life does not promise immunity from pain, but it changes the nature of that pain. When we approach difficulty through the lens of reason, the setback ceases to be an indictment of our entire worth. It becomes merely a data point, a challenge to refine our understanding. We learn to accept what is outside our power with dignity, understanding that this acceptance is not passive resignation. It is an active endorsement of rational order. The true measure of a life well lived is therefore found in the coherence between reasoned thought and lived action. It is in the harmonious continuation of disciplined effort, balanced emotional judgment, and profound contemplative inquiry. It is not a sudden epiphany, but a steady, measured devotion to becoming more fully human through reflection itself. This internal dialogue becomes our most reliable guide. When faced with complexity, we must listen past the clamor of immediate desires and societal pressures. We must hear that gentle whisper, the unwavering voice of reason, which reminds us always that true happiness is not a gift granted by fate, but an ongoing symphony composed by the disciplined exercise of the mind. We have walked together through the paths of action and intention. We have learned that excellence is not a singular prize awaiting discovery, but rather a careful construction built moment by moment. Our understanding has moved from defining virtue in theory to mastering it through sustained practice. Yet, even as we approach this final reckoning with what constitutes a good life, reality insists on testing the fragile structures of our conviction. The world does not wait for us to be fully enlightened before it throws its setbacks upon us. It operates according to brutal indifference, recognizing no boundaries between inner discipline and external chaos. We confront now the unavoidable truth that much of life remains stubbornly outside the perimeter of our will, beyond the reach of even the wisest contemplation. Consider this simple reality. Setbacks arrive unbidden. They are not punishments for failure in character, but they are simply occurrences. A venture collapses due to unforeseen shifts in fortune. A trust is broken by carelessness or ambition that knows no ethical limit. These events do not merely inconvenience us. They challenge the very core premise of our philosophy, the notion that rigorous self-discipline somehow guarantees tranquility. The heart reacts predictably, even after all this learning. The initial impulse toward despair is potent. We look at the fallen pillar and wonder if our accumulated wisdom was just a comforting illusion, a philosophical anesthetic we applied to numb ourselves before the inevitable pain. Is virtue merely preparation for tragedy? Does profound self-mastery offer any shield against the unpredictable malice of human failing or the sheer caprice of chance? The struggle now is internal, yet it pivots entirely on external circumstance. It forces us to dismantle our carefully erected bulwark of control. We must admit that true flourishing cannot be predicated solely upon perfecting one's response. It must also account for the brute reality of imperfection outside ourselves. We have diligently focused on cultivating inner judgment, the art of refining thought, choosing rational assent over emotional reaction. This was our grand lesson. Take responsibility only for what passes through your mind and how you choose to judge it. Yet, what if the external event itself is so overwhelming, so profoundly unjust, that even a perfectly reasoned response feels inadequate? What if the blow landed not on a single failure, but on the scaffolding of multiple, interwoven hopes? The path seems to demand a radical shift in focus, a subtle repositioning of our philosophical gaze. We must move beyond simply perfecting our reaction and begin accepting the sheer weight of what is. This acceptance is not resignation. It is far more demanding than mere emotional tolerance. It requires a deep, intellectual acknowledgement that some things cannot be undone, cannot be reasoned away, and cannot even be significantly altered by our best efforts. To accept what cannot be controlled is to undergo an act of profound psychological liberation. It means dismantling the internal expectation that a rational mind must always predict or mitigate every negative external consequence. It requires finding peace not in the elimination of difficulty, but in recognizing the stable ground that remains beneath the shifting debris of fortune. The moment we surrender the desperate need for control over outcomes, something profound occurs. The tension that has coiled within us, the anxiety about if or when the next disaster will strike, begins to loosen its grip. We begin to understand that much of our suffering does not spring from the external event itself, but from the secondary struggle, the fight against what reality insists must happen. When we stop fighting the inevitability, a space opens up. This is where true resilience resides. It is not the ability to bounce back quickly. It is the ability to sustain oneself while broken, while circumstances remain stubbornly uncooperative. It is the quiet dignity of continuing to act virtuously, to speak truthfully, to work diligently, to treat another with care, despite the knowledge that all effort might ultimately be swallowed by the tide of fate. This realization fundamentally recalibrates the understanding of eudaimonia. Happiness is not the absence of uncontrollable struggle. It is the persistent presence of character in the face of unavoidable suffering. It is the intellectual acceptance, the inner calm that recognizes, my effort defines me, but the outcome does not define my worth. The practice shifts from prevention to endurance. We train our minds to view misfortune not as a personal failure or a cosmic injustice, but as raw material, a challenging field upon which we must continue practicing wisdom and temperate action. The external blow becomes merely the backdrop for an internal discipline. It teaches us that human freedom is profoundly constrained. We are free only in our assent. We can choose our judgments even when we cannot dictate the events surrounding those judgments. This understanding frees us to look outward again, but with new eyes. We see that true mastery does not mean controlling other people or external markets. It means accepting their unpredictable nature and designing a life lived within acceptable parameters of human limitation. Our greatest function remains our internal one, the continuous act of self-correction, the commitment to rational judgment, regardless of how noisy or chaotic the world becomes. The ultimate wisdom offered by this acceptance is a form of quiet strength. It is the steady breath taken after realizing that, while we cannot command the wind, we can choose the posture of our soul against it. This disciplined acceptance allows us to finally synthesize all the strands of learning, the need for action, the necessity of community, and above all, the grounding stability found in acknowledging the vast domain beyond our grasp. We build a life rooted not in hope for perfect conditions, but in unwavering commitment to principled response. The wisdom we have accrued through disciplined thought and practiced action has taught us a profound truth, that self-improvement is never truly solitary. We learned, first, that our inner disposition dictates how we meet the harsh reality of external events. Our resilience was built not by avoiding difficulty, but by consistently choosing reason as our guiding principle in the face of unavoidable chaos. But what good is a perfectly mastered interior life if it remains a hidden chamber? If virtue only serves the self, contained within its own boundaries and disciplines, does it truly fulfill humanity's highest potential? Aristotle forces us to consider that human existence is inherently communal. We are not islands. We are threads woven into the fabric of one another. The personal discipline we cultivated, the mindful judgment in every small response, the steady hand applied through difficult times, is meant for more than mere self-maintenance. It must spill outward. It must affect the world that surrounds us. This is where philosophy transitions from a private meditation to an ethical equation. We have journeyed far from the confines of personal discipline, learning that while self-mastery is a profound foundation, it cannot exist in isolation. The life of man, after all, is intrinsically connected to others. We are fundamentally social creatures. To speak of flourishing purely for oneself is to build an edifice upon sand. Our very existence suggests a communal nature, a role within the tapestry of human society that gives our individual threads meaning. The highest expression of virtue, therefore, requires moving beyond mere self-satisfaction. It demands contribution, service, and function within a larger whole. We are, as Aristotle suggested, animals of polity or zoon politiken, a being naturally designed for community life. Our purpose does not terminate at the boundary of our own comfort or concern. Consider the athletic victory that is celebrated only by the crowd, or the artisan whose skill is judged by the marketplace. The recognition and value we derive from others confirm our place in the communal order. True self-worth blossoms only when it connects outwards, fulfilling a necessary function for the collective good. To optimize oneself is to reach a personal peak, but true eudaimonia requires that one contributes strength or reason, thereby enabling the flourishing of others as well. The question then becomes, what does this communal life require of us? It demands more than mere tolerance. It asks for meaningful participation, for identifying where our unique talents and disciplined virtues can best serve the needs of the city, the family, or the philosophical community around us. This is a shift from individual achievement to collective contribution. This realization introduces a profound ethical responsibility. Our personal virtue is not merely an internal jewel we polish for ourselves. It becomes a currency used in social exchange. When we act justly within our small sphere, when we practice temperance at the dinner table, or maintain courage when faced with mild discomfort, we are not just improving our own souls. We are strengthening the moral fabric of the community itself. The greatest suffering, paradoxically, might be found in isolation. It is the silence where discourse should be. It is the hand that reaches out and finds no corresponding embrace. This reminds us that humanity thrives on reciprocity. Our personal journey cannot culminate in a silent chamber of perfect contemplation if that contemplation does not inform our actions toward others. The disciplined life, therefore, must be woven into the fabric of civic engagement. The highest form of self-actualization is found when one recognizes and fulfills their specific role within the political or social structure. This realization moves the focus from simply being good to doing what is needed for goodness in others. We begin to understand that every individual talent, whether it be logical deduction, physical strength, artistic creativity, or empathetic listening, has a proper place. A flute player, while skilled, functions best when their music supports the mood of the gathering. The general serves best when leading troops in formation. Our excellence is defined by our contribution to the greater harmony. The journey thus moves beyond simply asking, "What should I do to be happy?" Instead, it must become, "How can I uniquely and virtuously function within this world to contribute to the life of others?" This outward focus prevents the ethical self from becoming complacent or narcissistic. It forces us to measure our own virtue, not against some impossible ideal, but against the palpable needs and potential of our community. The joy of a flourishing existence is thus redefined as functional excellence, a harmony between one's personal disciplined character and one's necessary contribution to the whole. We realize that true fulfillment is found in becoming an indispensable element, necessary, valuable, and actively engaged within the lives of those who surround us. It is this shared destiny that ultimately gives weight and meaning to our struggles and our successes alike. We have traveled a long way through the disciplines of self-mastery. We learned that happiness is not merely a gift granted by fortune, nor is it found solely in the quiet solitude of our own minds. We discovered that true being requires an outward turn, a necessary participation within the sphere of community and purpose. Yet, even after understanding these vast principles, the necessity of balance, the rigor of disciplined effort, the warmth of shared virtue, and the obligation to our polis, a subtle current of yearning remains. The mind seeks not just knowledge, but ultimate completion. We ask ourselves, when all this hard work is done, does a singular peak of joy await us? Is there some perfect state of being that marks the end of the struggle? The initial inclination might be to imagine eudaimonia as a final destination, a glorious summit reached after traversing every moral challenge and mastering every skill. We picture it as a point in time, a stable plateau of profound contentment. But Aristotle's wisdom guides us away from this model of the finished monument. If happiness were merely a goal to be achieved, then once attained, our pursuit would cease. And if our lives are defined by growth, by striving, and by the constant calibration between excess and deficiency, how could the journey ever suddenly stop? To assume happiness is a static endpoint is to fundamentally misunderstand what human flourishing truly entails. The realization begins in a quiet reflection on the nature of process itself. Life is not a photograph. It is movement. It is rhythm, like the steady beat of a heart or the cyclical turning of seasons. To savor the flourish means shifting our focus from the arrival to the act. It means finding profound fulfillment within the continuous, mindful execution of virtue. The reward is not waiting at the finish line. It resides in the measured step we take right now. Think of the musician. When they play a complex piece, the joy is not simply waiting for the applause at the end. The joy lies in the perfect coordination between breath, finger, and emotion, the elegant interaction with the instrument itself. The art is the performance, the life is the practice. Similarly, our virtuous existence unfolds like a sustained composition. Every moment of reasoned choice, every act of disciplined friendship, every contribution to the community contributes not toward a final score, but toward maintaining a harmonious pattern. We are always composing ourselves anew. The profound lesson here is one of gratitude for effort. It teaches us that struggle is intrinsically valuable. The friction generated by making difficult choices, the choice to speak truth gently, the choice to forgive unexpectedly, the choice to focus when distraction beckons, is not a penalty. It is the necessary energy that allows the spirit to glow. We learn to treat life not as a problem to be solved, but as an art form to be practiced. Our greatest accomplishment is not reaching perfection, for imperfection is merely the reality of being human, but rather the ability to perpetually refine our craft. This refinement demands vigilance and mindful engagement in every passing moment. The capacity to savor the flourish is the recognition that life's richness is distributed across its unfolding hours. It asks us to pause before judgment, to appreciate the elegant complexity of a fully integrated self, a self built upon reason, habit, and community responsibility. There is a deep satisfaction in knowing that your worth does not hinge on having everything perfect, or even on achieving one single grand triumph. Your inherent value comes from the pattern of striving itself, the commitment to excellence day after daily. It is this relentless return to principled action that constitutes eudaimonia. We are flourishing because we are actively engaged in becoming better versions of ourselves, not because some external force has finally validated us as complete. The mind settles into a reflective calm. The anxiety about being done fades away, replaced by the quiet assurance of steady movement. The journey is inherently valuable simply for its quality of engagement. It is in the act of choosing wisely, again and again, that we taste true fulfillment. This continuous becoming becomes the ultimate state of grace, the enduring joy that marks a truly well-lived life. We are not waiting for happiness. We are actively generating it through disciplined living. And in this mindful participation with the world, this ceaseless, graceful unfolding, resides the highest form of human joy. We have traveled through theory and practice. We have learned that virtue is not a brilliant insight or a single perfect moment. It is something far more subtle, more constant, like the rhythm of breath in deep sleep. Philosophy, we realize now, is rarely meant to be a grand speech delivered from a podium. To attend it as an observer is insufficient. One must become its active participant. The highest form of wisdom does not reside solely within careful contemplation, nor only within grand acts of civic virtue. It settles into the way we move, the choices we make when no one is watching, and the manner in which we greet the morning light. The understanding that truly shapes a life is this: Philosophy is not merely a destination to be reached, and it certainly is not a final thesis statement to be printed and shelved. If we believe that goodness is some fixed state, a glorious summit of character never to be passed, we risk falling into the trap of perpetual dissatisfaction. We will always look over the peak, searching for permanence, forgetting that the climb itself holds all the reward. Instead, consider life as a continuous practice. As an artisan shapes raw wood, or an athlete refines years of tireless training, true flourishing is found in the enduring act of becoming better. It is the daily commitment to refinement, the gentle refusal to accept mediocrity when excellence is possible. This ongoing process of self-correction, this willing engagement with imperfection, defines our humanity. The wisdom we seek must therefore be embodied. It cannot remain merely an abstract set of rules for dealing with life. It must become instinct, a deeply ingrained, compassionate habit that guides the hand and softens the heart without conscious effort. This is where intellectual understanding transitions into lived excellence. The knowledge of what is right, the rational recognition of virtue, holds immense value, yes, but it lacks power until it has been tested by time, friction, and disappointment. Think of kindness. Knowing that kindness is virtuous is a thought, practicing it consistently, especially when we are tired, frustrated, or provoked, that is the act. It demands stamina. It requires us to constantly recalibrate our response against the easy path of selfishness or retaliation. The moral landscape is not forgiving. It rewards only consistent effort. The gentle conclusion, then, is a call back to simple vigilance. It asks for nothing grandiose, no singular heroic sacrifice that will suddenly define one's entire existence in retrospect. It merely asks for sustained attention, an attention paid to the small moments, the patience shown at a frustrating delay, the honest words spoken before the urge to lie takes hold, the willingness to examine one's own judgment after a failure. We must accept that the striving is the substance. The goal is not perfection, because perfection implies a final, unchanging point of arrival. Our aim is instead optimal motion, a life lived in disciplined flow, capable of immediate adjustment, resilient enough to absorb shock without fracturing entirely, and generous enough to benefit others even when we feel drained. The great lesson returns us to the present tense. Virtue is not something we earn once. It is what we are doing right now. It is the decision made seconds before reacting in anger. It is the voluntary act of listening fully to a difficult truth. It is choosing the more arduous, yet morally correct path, simply because reason guides us there. And this realization brings with it profound peace. The weight lifted is that of the expectation for an ultimate solution. We do not need a grand revelation. We only need commitment, a quiet promise to approach tomorrow's challenges with the tools we have acquired. Practiced wisdom, ethical consideration, and above all, the continuous faith in our own capacity for reasoned improvement. To live well is thus understood not as reaching a mountaintop of bliss, but as maintaining an even, steady pace on the winding path, finding grace